Good day, everybody. Welcome to this December Character Coach Connection with Nations of Coaches. We're excited to see you. I'm excited for this turn in the middle of the season where things go from being non-conference games, where suddenly it's conference games entirely, and there are a number of changes that happen in the flux of that change. And that's going to be the primary point of our discussion today. I have some great folks with us, so please, if you will, let's run around the screen here and introduce ourselves with your name, where you're serving, and that will carry it for us. Let's start with Shan Smith.
Yeah, Shan Smith, Indiana State University.
Very good.
Chase Wagner with Purdue Fort Wayne.
Very good. Coach Doherty.
Yeah, Stan Doherty, Assistant Regional Director of Central and Southern Indiana.
Very good. Rich and Becky.
Yep, Rich Duffield. I'm Morehead State men's basketball.
Becky Duffield with women's basketball, Morehead State.
That's convenient, huh? Two in the same household. Coach Bob Lichty, can you tell us who you are and where you are? I don't know if you can show us your face. Bob may be in the car. We'll see. But Bob's up at Wisconsin Stout. He works for FCA up there and is character coach to men's basketball there at Wisconsin Stout. I'm Roger Lipe. I think most everybody knows me, but I'm thrilled to see you and talk about this. Coach Doherty, would you take a minute or as much time as you want, frankly, to be able to talk about how things change in the coach's life and his family and the support staff, everybody in that process, as things begin to shift from conference play from non-conference play into conference play, why that matters and why it's really important that we understand what's happening with them.
Sure. Roger had asked yesterday for us to just give some input on that. And just my background, I've coached 43 years, 19 in college, 24 in high school. In the college situation, which we're dealing with, a couple things came to mind. Like the first thing was like the players that most coaches, I think, early in the season are playing a little longer rotation, the bench is a little longer. You're playing guys, seeing how they're going to fit in, how are they going to work, whether it be transfer, new guys, big guys returning, whatever. And then come conference play, just I think most coaches out of wanting to win are going to shorten that bench a little bit. So I think one of the things that you guys could be on the lookout for are the guys that were playing, that 8th, 9th, 10th guy that maybe were playing, 15, 16, 18 minutes in the first 7, 8 non-conference games. And now it gets down to conference games. All of a sudden they're playing maybe 8 or 10, or maybe there's a game where they don't play hardly at all. I know my experience of those guys would come into my office, and like, especially young guys, like, Coach, what you want me here? What's going on? I'm like, no, this is part of the growth process. But those guys that can, naturally are going to get down a little bit about that. And at the same time, from a coaching standpoint, that's very important because you're one injury away from you might be in 25 minutes and we need you to win a game. So I think being on the lookout for those guys and how you can encourage them, how you can pull them aside, how you can talk to them. The other thing I was thinking about is just even from the coach's standpoint, you get amped up a little more because it's conference play. So that edginess or whatever, how might that affect your family, your wife, whatever? If you go through a stretch where you maybe lose 2 or 3 in a row, or maybe 4 out of 5 or something like that, I think sometimes, at least most good coaches are really involved in the process with their players. And they talk a lot about stick with the process. You stick with it as a player. Sometimes a coach might need to be reminded of that from you guys. Hey, Coach, you're doing everything right. Coach, stick with the process. Remind your players. Stick with the process. You know what you want. You see the outcome, and maybe just a reminder of that. And then, if they're a Christian coach or doing it the right way, hey, remember the big picture. you're still changing men's lives. And that's what it's about. So some thoughts there that I thought about yesterday, Roger, as you talked.
Good, good. Some of us have been doing this for a while. How have you seen coaches? Are you able to perceive that they feel more pressure and that they wind up exhibiting more pressure as this shift takes place? Shan, have you seen that? Bob, Rich, have you guys seen that happen as coaches? It seems more pressurized once conference play starts. Anybody?
Well, yeah, I think
Yeah.
because the
Yeah.
conference starting off, that has to do with getting in the conference tournament.
Exactly.
All that stuff, starts from day one, especially if there's some teams that you probably should beat early on. And, if you're not beating those teams, it's going to get you. So I think that's where the pressure comes too, is that, because, that's one criteria to keep your job. Are you making the tournament?
Yep. Good. Shan?
Yeah, I was just going to say, it just seems like it's the definition of narrowing the focus.
Uh-huh.
And so, and it screens down from the bench, as Stan said, to the tension that rises. And so, speaking into that occasion, always being that encouragement for the coaches and the team, and reminding the team, you might be sitting on the bench, but you need to be the best teammate. So here's some things that you need to do to be the best teammate.
Yep. Good. Rich, are you able to see this, and how do you respond?
Yeah, maybe on the flip side a little bit for teams like us, it's a good opportunity for a restart because you just got your butts whipped by 4 teams that paying you a lot of money to beat you, and then you played a few teams that you're supposed to blow out of the water, and then a couple like level teams, and now it's like, okay, the real season starts. So that's kind of where at our level, that's sort of what it's like. And so, yeah, there's definitely a sense of new pressure, but also welcomed newness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a good way to approach it. I've often, across 28 seasons of basketball, I've talked with teams about, look, there's 4 seasons in a college basketball season. There's preseason, there's non-conference season, there's conference season, and there's the conference tournament. They're all distinct things. They build on one another, absolutely. But the whole thing culminates in this at the end. And so you can almost, like you said, you can almost re-rack. All right, we're starting over. It's conference season. That stuff in the past doesn't really mean anything. Now, let's get ready here. And so that is one way to help shape things if they're not going well. You can kind of reframe the process. And as Stan said, I think his comments were brilliant in that we keep reminding people about process that stay at, and I don't know how many times I've written handwritten notes to coaches in the middle of a losing streak with things like, Coach, you're doing the right stuff. You stay at the process. You care about the right things and you're doing the right things. It'll work out for you. Just stay at it. And they find that encouraging because frankly, nobody else is telling them that.
Yeah, I think the coaches that get it, and Preston, who was here a little bit, he did a good job with this. Like, just from day one, decide that your mentality is going to be to get better every day. No matter what happens, that's the goal, get better every day. And so that helps take the edge off. So, yeah, reminding them, I think, is good. Reminding them of what they say.
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Coach, you remember when you said this? Yeah, that's true. Becky, you might have a better insight on this next facet of this than any of us do. When you've been around, either with the women you're serving now or watching Rich and the men's teams, have you noticed the pressure on coaches' wives in particular and how they kind of wear this differently than earlier in the season? Is there something perceptible there?
Yeah, I mean, I'd say so. I think they feel the pressure, and they sometimes get the either stress at home or maybe no conversation at home, and so it can be hard. Like they want to be a part of it, and sometimes they feel left out, and then sometimes maybe they hear a lot and just feel that stress along with the coach.
Yep. Stan, when you would go home after a bitter defeat or whatever else, were you a guy who out loud processed things with your wife, or did you just bottle it up and be pretty quiet when you would go home? And how would your wife respond to you in those kind of difficult moments?
She had a good perspective on it. I didn't like to talk a lot about it with her. She was, we were raising kids or whatever, or she was, and so she was outstanding with that. But for me, it was more like try my best to not take it home. I heard a great story I run a father-son basketball camp I've done for 30 years, and one of the campers there, a guy there was telling me a story about he saw his neighbor coming home one day, and before he would go in, he would notice he would stop by outside and like touch the leaves of a tree. And one day he said, "What are you doing?" He goes, "Well, that's my worry tree." He said, "Before I walk in the house, I just kind of put all my concerns, I just physically touch the tree to leave them there before I walk in." And I heard that story. I thought, that's really good. That's really good. We may not have to touch a tree, but touch something in the car, or mentally just say, I'm not going to bring this home. So I try my best. Now, the situation with that is you need to have somewhere to, so hopefully you got a good assistant coach or a character coach that you can say, hey, I got to talk to you about a situation. That's where you guys are so valuable.
Yep. That's really good. Kevin has joined us from up in Minnesota. Can you say, hey, Kevin?
Yes, sir. I'm here. Sorry I'm late.
Yeah, no worries. Have you been around some teams where you can see a real difference between the non-conference season and when conference play starts, and the effects of that on the players and coaches?
I'm not that perceptive.
Well,
yeah.
I think you probably are. But here's the thing. Like Shan mentioned, and Stan also mentioned, I think, that when the bench starts to shorten, especially now in the era of the transfer portal, some of those guys already have their minds on the transfer portal, and it's December. Some of the, like, there's one guy, we shall go nameless here, but on our team, I look at him, and I think the only thing keeping him here now is the NIL money he's been paid. Without that, he would already left. And so you think that guy's bringing his best attitude to the practice every day. And now he's been redshirted. And so he's doubly kicked off. And so it's like, this is less than wonderful for everybody concerned, because at some point that attitude can leak into other people, and oh my, it's a mess. Other thoughts about midseason changes, what's happening, and how that affects how we serve them? Chase, did you experience some things, or are you seeing some of these things happen from your angle?
Not really. I mean, this is my first year in the men's basketball program, so yeah, I'm just learning a lot. Like you said, this is the first time I've heard of, I mean, other than what you've said about there being like a second half of the season, things like that. So yeah, definitely learning a lot.
Yep. Well, obviously, one of the things that makes the conference season so important, as Stan mentioned earlier, is how the team finishes in the conference season determines the seeding for the conference tournament. And if you do really well, you get the easiest path to the championship. That's the point. If you do poorly, you've got the toughest road to the championship, and it becomes a really uphill climb. And so that's the point, is to try to get the best teams to the championship game, to then send them to the more national tournament kind of situations. And so the whole thing's built on that. So that's what supercharges the pressure on this portion of the season. And lots of us wind up wearing that with our teams. I have to watch myself. Just as our staff got fired at the end of the year, I was pretty angry. I wasn't directly affected, but I care about those people. And so it was really a difficult situation. I'm really glad I didn't bump into the administrators, or I might have punched them. I'm like, I was pretty jacked up. Thankfully, I did not. And so we had good story to tell. All right.
Yeah, Raj, one other thing, Stan said that we need to continue to remind these coaches of the process. I think another thing that I've seen over the years, and it's something that's obscure, but the increase of social media chatter and specifically negative points. And so we just need to continue to remind them of who they are, not who the media says they are.
Yeah.
And that's a big part of it. The other, you mentioned some things there with new teams. New teams. I think one of the thing that you often see by the time you're here are those players that are not fitting the culture.
Mhm.
And so those are good opportunities to sit down at the bench and just encourage them in ways and help them walk through some difficult times, and they'll decide whether they'll want to move on in the future. So
Yeah. Great
One
point.
comment I'll make
Please,
too. It's
Rich.
good point, Shan. I think our coach the other day, he was chatting with me, and I've heard these things before, but he said, the X's and O's part isn't very difficult, honestly. He said that's the easy part of the job, but he said the challenge is just, the people aspect of it all, and the relationships and all that. And so maybe a reminder to all of us at this point is, it's fun to talk basketball, and I think it's okay to talk basketball too, especially if it's invited. But being real keen on, hey, let's talk about the people, being sharp on,
Mhm.
we got to be sharp on the people aspect so that we can help them remember the people aspect and how to talk about it. And so that's just
Yeah.
something to think about as this point goes. They're not worried. They're going to figure out everything the other team's doing. They know the strategies. They're going to execute or not execute. I mean, but yeah, then what do you do with the kid later? It's crazy how much. I just think it's a lot. Maybe it's different. I think it's a lot different than it used to be. Like I reminded our guys the other day. So it was Thanksgiving. We just gotten beat by a team we shouldn't have got beat by, and on the day before Thanksgiving, and then on Thanksgiving Day, we had a nice little gratitude time. But I sat in after the game on Wednesday. I sat in and filmed with the coaches, and just watched them dissected everything. And at the end, I just reminded them, like, hey, let's think about this for a second. Like, what's the quote by a guy named G.K. Chesterton? He said something like, "A good soldier doesn't go to war because he hates the enemy in front of them, but because he loves the people behind them, or loves what's behind them," something like that. And I was like, let's think for a second. Like, I don't know how much our guys love each other. Like, we've practiced basketball since June 6th, and we haven't done much anything else other than practice basketball. So, and coach actually, he took that to heart, and he made it really part of the next game and the next focus. And we actually ended up beating a team that we weren't supposed to beat the next day. But the idea was, wow, we really do need to focus on the people aspect a little bit more. And yeah, so just a reminder, make sure we're talking about people with these coaches.
I think
Exactly.
Rich, to duck
Go
on
ahead,
that a little
Stan,
bit.
please.
I had a character coach when we were talking about being a character coach, and I was talking to the head coach, a D3 school, and he's like, "Yeah, we had one at my other school when I was an assistant, and they're really good at like watching body language and different things that the players are doing that a coach doesn't always see." And I thought that was very perceptive. He's a young D3 coach, but he found the value of that. So, Rich, back to your point of people, when I'm coaching, I'm not worried about what their body language or what they're thinking. I'm doing X's and O's and what do we need to do to win the next game, and are you on board or not? And if you're not, then probably you're not going to play or not going to be where you need to help us. But then I can come back to the people part later on. But you as a character coach can see that even in the course of a practice, and even afterwards or before or something, or whenever you can, just say, "Hey, how you doing? Notice how whatever your relationship is with them. You may say about rolling your eyes or your body language or whatever. You have to have a relationship probably to talk about that, but you'll notice those things, and the coach may not. And that's all part of the people aspect, Rich, again, which then, depending on your relationship with the coach, you may be able to go, hey, coach, I don't know if you noticed, John over here, he's struggling a little bit. So, I just want to make you aware that in case you didn't see that. And that's helpful to me. That would have been helpful to me. I never had a character coach. I had good assistants that would notice those things.
Good. A couple of things to think about, just given the advantage that we have of this time of year. Christmas is just around the corner. This is the perfect time to do something like write a note to everybody. I type wrote, I put this in my computer, wrote it out, printed it out, signed them, got a Christmas letter for all the players, all the coaches, all the support staff, all the way to the youngest student manager, just all of those folks. Just a simple greeting kind of thing. Nobody else is doing that except us. So take advantage of that. Two, rather than just talk basketball, like Rich said, when you get on the floor, especially this next week, ask them about their Christmas plans. Ask them about family. Ask them about, what do you guys do for Christmas? How does this go? I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to connect with this Muslim player that we have. It's obviously not about Christmas for him, but it'll be about family. Are you going to be able to go to Sweden, or is family coming to you, or how's this going to work while we've got a little bit of a few days off? There's some other things like that. Look for those opportunities. And lastly, what I'd say, especially during through all of January and February, seek out the people at the end of the bench. It's going to be pretty apparent who the stars of the team are, who that first 5 and probably the 7 or 8 that get a lot of playing time. Seek out the people toward the end of the bench, because nobody else is paying any attention to them unless they're screwing things up in practice. Go seek them out. Talk to them. Tell them why they're important. We had a kid previously for 4 years that he was a walk-on. He knew he was a practice player. He knew if he got time, it might be 30 seconds at the end of a blowout. But he did that for 4 years. I made it a point to seek him out and tell him, look, son, you're important to us because you bust your tail every day against our best players. That makes them better. You're a huge part of our team. Don't undervalue your purpose here. And things like that really help those folks stay engaged when it could be easier just to, I just don't care, and their attitude goes south. Any further thoughts you have about midseason, how things change, and the implications of this higher pressure on players, coaches, support staff, and even family? Folks, this is why we're here. Because this machine will run over them if it's allowed to. We get to be the people who actually care for the people and help be a sense of a buoy to them, help carry them along, especially if things are not going well. Basketball is fun if you're winning. The process is hard if you're not winning. It becomes a grind. And so let's be mindful, especially if there's a losing skid or something like that. That's when we become even more valuable than ever.
Roger, one thing we haven't talked about yet is parents. That's the one thing I've noticed over 50 years is how much more parents are involved. There are games. There are, I wonder if they have jobs anymore. And, it was funny because I was just talking to our head coach last week because I said, I wanted to see you after the game. It was a great win, but you're talking to your wife. And he goes, that's on purpose. He goes, I go spend time because parents won't come up to me then with complaints. So that was his way of self-protecting, of getting that, they can go because, where we are, the fans are across the court. And so he sees these parents, he's aware of them. And so I think it's, it's being able to talk about, those things, because sometimes, even with his assistants, he doesn't want to, but with those. And then I think one thing you hit on too is that I really try and he's got a couple kids to follow his kids and what they're involved with, here at the high school or the middle school, he was shocked this year when his son came home because he's kind of a little different kid. And he goes, hey, Dad, I want to play 8th grade football, which just shocked our that he wanted to play football in his son. And so it's kind of a running joke with us and that. But I think it's those things too, as we can bring sometimes a little lighthearted stuff into their life because they don't see a lot of.
Yep. Good. Stan, do you have some insight for us related to parents from a coach's perspective, and how things maybe have changed and what you see presently?
Oh yeah, we could talk a long time about that. After 45 years, it's funny. My son coached for 17 years, and he was a little better at managing that than, and he just got out a few years ago. But he would talk to parents right after games, and I made that mistake once 35, 40 years ago, and I said no. I think Bobby, coach is wise to talk to his wife or whatever. So it is different, and I think coaches just have to know that and have to meet with them. And I got better at meeting with them, and I was good at meeting with them after the fact, but not after a game. I was just too amped, and I couldn't do that. And I finally recognized that and would just tell them, let's wait, 24 hours or whatever. That's a little more difficult with colleges because they may have traveled 3 hours to watch their son not play as much as they wanted. And they got to go home, and they may not want to do a phone call or a Zoom call the next day. So it's definitely a challenge. I think it's a good point Bobby brought up that especially at the D3 level or the small college level, it's a little more prevalent. Although at all levels now, even D1, they're around, but at the D3 level, or small college, you see them across the way. When there's 150 people there, you're going to know where the parents are or hear them or whatever. So that's a challenge, a good point to bring up, like coaches. Maybe even a discussion with the coach. How are you handling, parents now? What's your plan? Maybe let them talk to you about it, and maybe you'll have some ideas as well.
Just one other thing with parents, especially with us, is that this will be the first time, like next week, where our kids are going to go home for maybe 4 days, 5 days to be in their family. And there may be some discussions with their family about playing time and where they see them. So I think we have to be aware of that as those kids come back, is that to get them back into the team concept, because we know, parents, they're concerned about one person and that. So kind of keep an eye out for those kids when they come back, because the kids know, but they still have their parents that want to, that don't understand.
Yep. And Uncle Johnny, the wannabe agent, and all those other folks are going, oh, settle down, Uncle Johnny. He's not playing in the NBA. He's the fourth guy off the bench at our place. What are you thinking? But the voice of reason is not necessarily there with Uncle Johnny. Okay, any further thoughts? Or I'm going to have, go ahead. Was that you, Shan?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, not only parents, but the intensity that rises for support staff, managers, trainers during this time. And so continuing to think about them, reach down, encourage them as much as possible. And Stan, one of the things that I think has probably changed as well is a lot of these coaches are fundraisers. And so, they've been added an extra weight upon their win-loss records, right? And that is, bottoms in the seats and all of that sort of thing. That now is a concern, and so any way that we can help, get involved with that. And sometimes that's talking to boosters. I get a lot of opportunity to do that.
Yep, very good.
Roger,
yes,
can I share one positive thing that happened? We can only do it in basketball. We went up last Friday and played North Dakota State, which only in basketball, we could never do that in football. But our coach does it, and it's just a great experience for our kids. It's a 6-hour bus ride to play in a beautiful. All the Shields money goes to the Fargo Dome and that basketball thing. But our kids all got in, and our kids on the end of the bench got a couple minutes playing, against a D1 school. And I think it was just a positive thing to send the kids home now with that. They may not get many minutes the rest of the season, but they got their 2 minutes on a Division I court. And so Jim did a nice job. That's the second year we've done that.
Good. Yep. Wise coaches find ways to keep guys engaged in a great way. All right, guys. See Kevin there? See that safe behind him? That's where he keeps the world famous cinnamon rolls that wind up, the caramel rolls go to the staff. Is that right?
Yes,
There you go.
I keep my recipe right
in there.
in there.
Yeah. Well, I imagine at this time of the year, it may be even more valuable than ever. And as people are
Yeah.
preparing for Christmas and all that, some of those things warmly coming into the office would be pretty well received, huh?
Bet.
That's awesome. Hey, Kevin, to wrap things up, would you please pray for us, for the coaches, the players, the support staffs, and everybody as we approach this shift in the season?
Sure.
Please.
Father, I just thank you for this time, just to sit with folks that are about your business in the sporting field, Lord. I appreciate them. I appreciate just being here. And Father, I just ask your blessings on our folks here, that as they go about doing your work, that they'd be sensitive, conscientious, that, Lord, you'd encourage them, encourage each of us, Lord, as we have this opportunity. It's an unbelievable opportunity with young folks and with coaches that influence them. So, Lord, I just thank you. I just pray for good things, good blessings. Strengthen us, Lord. Encourage us as we go about doing your thing, Lord. In your name, amen.
Amen. Two final things to mention by way of promotion. If you will, mark your calendar for Saturday, March 1. That will be the college basketball day of prayer that we've done for several years in a row here. We'll do a character coach focused part of that at 11 a.m. Central Time. Obviously noon Eastern, and then it'll be 9 o'clock in the morning on the West Coast. But that's the college basketball day of prayer, the character coach focus for that on March 1. Our next back porch conversation is January 14th. We'll just get together and tell stories of how things are going, hear from each other, be encouraged by our teammates. Anything else for the common good before we wrap it all up? Becky, please keep Rich in line, and I'll see you all again on January 14, unless we happen to bump into each other and the Salukis kick your tail. Or maybe. We'll see. All right. Bless you all. Thanks.
Merry Christmas, everyone.
Bless you.